Well, this is going to be a kind of a rerun of an event which took place in 2007 with the so-called Four Horsemen, where in Christopher Hitchens's Washington apartment, four of us sat down together and discussed, and it was filmed on DVD. At that time, Ayaan Hirsi Ali was supposed to be the fifth, and right up to the last minute, she was going to be of that company. At the last minute, a sudden emergency took her to Holland, and very reluctantly she had to cancel, and so we ended up as four horsemen rather than, well, 4 plus 1 horsewoman.
The five pillars.
So it's extremely agreeable and appropriate that she should join us today. So welcome, Ayaan.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, what I say in my book Nomad, and I sent it, I sent you the manuscript before I published. I think I sent to Richard and to Sam. The point I was trying to make was that it's unrealistic for individuals who have lived with Islam and been completely indoctrinated to jump from being true Muslims, practicing Muslims, to atheists like me. And I didn't jump. It took me at least 10 years, the 10 years that I was in the Netherlands, surrounded by a culture of critical thinking and the shock of 9/11 to get out of that mindset. And after the publication of Infidel, I was getting emails from ex-Muslims. But these ex-Muslims, now very much familiar with the weaknesses of Islam and very clear on why they left Islam, didn't want to make that leap. They wanted to be religious. And the one red line, I mean, the main recurring theme in these letters was, I think, pertains to what you talked about this morning about death and consolation. They wanted to give up the horrors of the hereafter, but they didn't want to give up the consolation of religion. So they became Christians.
Hey, hold him.
He wants us to hold him.
Wonderful. What the contours of Ayaan Hirsi Ali's life look like. Let me just sketch them out. She was born in Somalia, lived in Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia before settling in Kenya as a teenager, was a member of the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood, a devout Muslim at that time. She escaped an arranged marriage and she moved to the Netherlands as a refugee, went to university, became an MP, and after 9/11, she renounced that faith and eventually wrote the global bestseller, Infidel. She was prominent in the new atheism movement, so much that her friend and admirer, Christopher Hitchens, described her the most important public intellectual probably ever to come out of Africa. She moved to America. She has written many best-selling books and been a powerful advocate on feminism, freedom of speech, Enlightenment values, immigration culture, and much else. And most recently, she stunned the intellectual world by announcing that she now considers herself a Christian, that she did in the pages of Unheard 3 days ago. So perhaps we'll come to that eventually. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, welcome to the Unheard Club.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think my story is a story of hope. I was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. I believed in some of these things that the people out there are saying. I took part in the book burning of Salman Rushdie's book. But I evolved, I changed, I grew, and I actually did that under very, very difficult circumstances.
You rejected the faith that you were brought up with.
Yes.
And it seems like you fell in love with a new creed, which was Western liberalism, basically.
I thought it was, when I came to the Netherlands and discovered that it was actually possible, for instance, for men and women to interact peacefully, well, until quite recently. That, yeah, the woke people have created all these problems. But I just thought that, you know, we had man-made governments in Europe and the rest of the West, and that was secular, that established rights and protected those rights with institutions. That there were universities where you could pursue any line of inquiry without any kind of condemnation. These countries were wealthy, there was a great deal of tolerance, and I fell in love with all of that. At that point, I was contrasting it with where I had come from. And my rejection, reading Bertrand Russell, and you know, in Holland, I made some atheist friends who said, this has nothing to do with religion. We've also struggled with our own religious darkness and intolerance. And so Christianity, they said, was exactly the same as Islam. And later on, when I met Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and so on, I think I jumped probably too soon on that atheist bandwagon and accepted the proposition that all religions are the same and are equally bad and equally dark too quickly. And I've now, I just think it would be intellectually dishonest of me, number one, if I say I'm still radically atheist. I'm not. But also, more importantly, if I don't take responsibility for my part in advancing the erosion of the building blocks of this Western civilization that I say I love so much. The Enlightenment is a child of these Judeo-Christian traditions. And I think you have to recognize that, because otherwise you're literally cutting off the roots. There was, when I was at ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, one of the participants said that Western civilization risks becoming a cut flower. And I think that's what we don't want. We don't want to pretend, I don't want to pretend, that all of these great things, the nation states, the universities, all of these economic advances, military advances, that somehow they just came floating along with the Enlightenment. I think the Enlightenment is a product of that. I do apologize for, I said when I was a member of Parliament in the Netherlands, I said I think that Muslim schools should be abolished. I was put in charge of the integration, the assimilation portfolio, and I thought, well, if they're going to Muslim schools and they're being Hamazified, they're not going to integrate into Dutch society. So I wanted Muslim schools to be closed. I still want Muslim schools to be closed, but I was very much mistaken about Christian schools. And Christian schools here and in the Netherlands and everywhere, these are the schools that are churning out kids who are balanced and happy and well-established and responsible citizens. So I don't think Christian schools should be shut. I think Islamic schools should be shut. It is more than, it's a double standard, but it's more than a double standard. There is a higher standard. And it's that higher standard that has brought all of those Muslims to come here and establish themselves here. And because that standard is higher, that's the standard we would like to maintain and upkeep. And I think we should stop being shy and inhibited and very coy about who we are and who we have to thank for all of these successes. I think that if I ask the room, raise your hand if you believe in life, if you believe in liberty, if you believe in the rule of law, if you believe in due process, if you believe that power is checked and that power has to be spread, if you believe in independent and impartial courts, you're going to raise your hand to all of that. Now, try and now bring it to its roots and pass that story on. And what I've observed in the last few years, 2-3 decades, and I didn't see the significance of it until the emergence of the woke movement, is when we were told, remove names like Easter and Christmas from schools, or remove any kind of religious studies from schools and expand everything with this and dilute everything. I didn't understand the significance of what was happening, but now that that's quite clear, and it is about dismantling our society brick by brick by removing every, again, meaningful edifice of it, that's, I think, when you stand up to them by telling the story of how and why all this came about, and again, transmitting it. You don't have to run around with the Bible and, hold these, I've seen some of this in America where, people pretend that they're acting like Jesus and they talk in tongues and they say they're healing the ill and so on. You don't have to make a caricature of Christianity and the Judeo-Christian legacy. But I think it's very, very important that we understand the story on which this is built, because human beings want stories. They like narratives. And right now, the prevailing narratives are destructive narratives.
Wouldn't it be useful to have, Islam and Christianity in general, religious studies, be more part of general education so that students can actually see what the difference is, instead of just saying, here's the one thing, this is what we stand for, but also here is why we don't stand for that, or just sort of make up your own mind in terms of, do you know what I mean? I know
what you mean, and it's called multiculturalism, and it has failed.
but they don't teach it in school, though.
That's exactly the core of multiculturalism, is that all of these cultures are the same, they're equal. Why don't we just have a menu of these different...
Let her answer.
Yeah, you have just a menu of these things, and why don't they just choose? And I think that it's unfair to young people to be told they're all equally the same. They are not. And we can sit here and I can argue why they're actually not, and Western Christian civilization is superior. And so I think at some point we have to be able to say that. And if we don't do it, then these other narratives will come and fill in the void and take it one step further, as the woke are doing now, by saying, actually, Western civilization is based on exploitation and slavery and colonization. Let's decolonize. Now, if you go to American universities, and I'm sure this whole decolonization nonsense is here, what they're really teaching is that because this is all, Western civilization is only based on these, colonized, exploited, robbed, and raped peoples. Let's reverse the roles. Let's destroy everything, do that to white male heterosexuals, and start with a clean slate. Yeah. And that we need violence to do that. That's what's taught.
A lot of people were also questioning what appeared to be more of a sort of practical way of making your faith decisions. That was very discussed. I mean, the article has been read many hundreds of thousands of times already since Friday, and no doubt will continue to be. But I did notice that as a common response, which is, it felt like a justification or a discussion of Christianity as a mechanism to resist cultural collapse, almost. Mm-hmm. And there was not so much of a personal journey, not so much about your own faith. Is there anything that you would expand on there?
Yes, there's a very personal story. I don't know to what extent it's useful, but on a very personal level, I went through a period of crisis, very personal crisis of fear, anxiety, depression. I went to the best therapists money can pay. I think they gave me an explanation of some of the things that I was struggling with, but I continued to have this big spiritual hole or need, as you call it. I tried to self-medicate. I tried to sedate myself. I drank enough alcohol you could use to sterilize a hospital. It would not, nothing helped. I continued to read, books on psychiatry and the brain, and none of that helped. All of that explained a small piece of the puzzle, but there was still something that I was missing. And then I think it was one therapist who said to me early this year, I think, Ayaan, you're spiritually bankrupt. And at that point, I was in a place where I had sort of given up hope. I was in this place of darkness, and I thought, well, what the hell? I'm going to open myself to that and see, asked her, what are you talking about? Mm. And we started talking about faith and a belief in God, and I explained to her that the God I grew up with was a horror show. He created you to punish you and frightened you, and as a girl and as a woman, you're just a piece of trash. And so I said to her, I explained to her why I didn't believe in God, and more than that, why I actually hated God. And then she asked me to design my own God, and she said, if you had the power to, attribute a higher power, if you had the power to make your own God, what would you do? And as I was going on, I thought, yeah, right. That's actually a description of Jesus Christ and Christianity at its best. And so instead of inventing yet another new God, I started diving into that story. And so far, my husband and I went about, both of us saying we're atheists, and now I like this story. I exploit, and the more I look at it, the more, I don't want to say I'm fulfilled, but I feel I no longer have this need, this void, I have to say, and I feel like I'm going somewhere. In fact, I was communicating with one of my atheist friends who is baffled, and who said, well, what are you doing, Ayaan? And it's this, I don't want our friendship to be, I respect him and he respects me. But on a bigger level, I think if you ask me what's going on in our society, my interpretation is people are asking for meaning, and things don't make sense. New ageism doesn't make sense. There's an article in The Atlantic this month where there's a great deal of mental health crisis among teenagers. And they've looked into this, and therapy hasn't helped. It doesn't help. It's not helping. I think that I have again, my atheist friends want to see evidence, because you say, do you believe that God created? And then you say, well, have you got any evidence for God? So I want to sidestep that question by saying, I do believe that there are stories, and I choose to believe the story that there is a higher power. Again, what that means, I'm still developing, I'm still learning as much as I can, but I choose to believe in that story because the legacy of that story is what we're living through. So yes, it's partly pragmatic, and yes, it is partly personal and spiritual. And it's a story I like because it's a story that says human life is worth living because it's in the image of God. And instead of seeking God somewhere out there who's ordering you to do all sorts of things, God is something in you. That's much, much more appealing to me than the story of there is nothing there. You have no more value than mold. And that's atheism. And I think if you tell people they have no more value than mold, then what's the point? The thing about atheism is it's a negative concept. It's basically a declaration saying, I don't believe that there is evidence that an entity called God exists. Other than that, it's nothing else. It's an assumption that if people conclude that, we're going to have all individuals, united around reason and enlightenment and knowledge and tolerance and moderation. But that's not how it turned out to be.